Hi, I'm Ken White. I'm the lead pastor of Forest Park Covenant Church, and we're in our podcast series, which we call On Mission. And I'm pleased to be here today with Nancy Hammond and Jan Welsh. I had said before the podcast began that this is actually just a contest to see who's my favorite person, because they're both people that I really love and respect in life and in their thought processes and things like that. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Both Hands ministry, but before I start that, I think it's just really helpful if we just gave a little snapshot of each other. So, Jan, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, are you originally from Muskegon? How long have you been coming to Forest Park Covenant Church?
I was born in Ludington, Michigan.
Oh, okay.
Quite a number of years ago. And after I met my husband is what brought me to Muskegon.
Okay.
My arrival at Forest Park was kind of through a rabbit trails one after another, but I came here because I was looking for a church that taught the true salvation message.
There you go.
And I came on a Sunday, and Russ gave a beautiful sermon on subject.
Yeah, Russ Carlson. That's
Yes.
great. That's great. How about you, Nancy?
I have been attending Forest Park for about 13 years. And I also came when Pastor Russ was here, and his message really grabbed me. But I really was drawn here in the first place because of the orphan ministry that we have going.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to talk a little bit about this Both Hands ministry, but let's talk just a little bit, Nancy, about your family and how it's grown. So tell us about your children and how they've come to be your children.
So I have 5 adopted children. My first 2, Gabriel and Anna, came from Russia. Gabriel was adopted from Siberia, and then Anna was adopted from St. Petersburg area in Veliki Novgorod.
Oh.
After that, I continued in foster care and ended up with 2 more children through foster care. But my heart has always been to have 6 children. But after Isaiah, with so many medical issues, I told God I was happy with 4, thank you. And then along came number 5. And after 5, I was definitely done. And then God said, nope, 1 more. So here we are.
Yes. And the one more, what's her name?
Her name is Haja, and she's from Sierra Leone, and she is still in an orphanage in Sierra Leone. She's almost 14 years old now.
Okay. Does she face any kind of challenges in life?
She actually has congenital glaucoma like Isaiah does. And over in Sierra Leone, she's unable to receive the medical care that she needs. And so that's kind of the urgency to get her over here, even though it's been over a year and a half in process already.
Yeah, well, great. So you're in the process of adopting her. And so can you just talk a little bit about what ministry you've come upon to help you with that, and then how Jan is involved in that?
So God has truly provided throughout the entire adoption process. And we were introduced to the Both Hands Project, which is a Christian organization that believes in following the Bible and helping widows on one hand and bringing home orphans on the other hand. And so you find a widow that's in need of home repairs or improvements, and then you ask for sponsors for the project, and the money from the sponsors goes to bringing the orphan home.
I gotcha. And so this is where Jan comes in. So how do you guys know each other other than coming to church? Is that basically how you know each other?
Basically, kind of. I remember when I met her in the restroom during a Bible study, and she had baby Isaiah with her.
Yeah.
That was quite a number of years ago.
Yeah.
And we've been Facebook friends also for a while.
Yeah. One of the things, just as a side note, is that Jan always posts things on Facebook, and I've seen so many really thoughtful, nice, insightful, spiritual posts. Oftentimes she'll post thoughts about the sermon I preached, and so I really appreciate that. So that's how you thought about Jan. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was funny. I was in my mind trying to come up with a widow, and I just really prayed, God, give me a name.
Yeah.
Just give me a name. And Jan came to my mind.
Yeah.
And I woke up in the middle of the night, and I have this crazy habit. When I can't sleep, I turn on Facebook. And the first person that pops up, I pray for them until I fall back asleep. Oh. And so who should pop up? But it was Jan.
Oh, I gotcha.
So then I messaged her. And then when we went over and talked to Jan, what did you say?
I said, yeah, I do have things that need repair.
Yeah. What kinds of things are you needing repaired in your home?
One is putting a little railing on. I've got a railing going down to my basement on the main staircase, but there's a couple steps at the top, and I have nothing to hang on to except reaching down for the doorknob at the bottom, and one of these days I may land on my head.
Oh, yeah.
I've been thinking for a long time I need to get somebody to put a railing in for me, and I just haven't gotten around to doing it. And then I have a garage door where the step is rotting away and the door doesn't want to stay shut. And the motion lights quit working, and my screens on my windows, I didn't have any on some of them, and insects were getting in, which you may remember, some bees.
Yeah. Last time I was over at Jan's house, I went over to just talk and pray, and she is like, by the way, could you help me to kill some bees? And I was like, sure. So I got up on a step ladder and sprayed some bees, but I don't think I told you how scary that was. But it worked out well, and you haven't had any bee problems.
No, and they just dropped by the millions. They were all these corpses all over the place. But then when John was looking at my window that day, we found a bunch more on the inside of the window that would have been in my house had you not killed them.
Yeah, yeah. That's Ken White, Wasp Exterminator. You can call me at my phone number and I'll come over. Yeah, that's great. And so just going back to both hands a little bit, so just say a little bit more about how that works out in terms of the project for a widow and an orphan and how the funds work and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so we develop a list of improvements or updates that Jan needs. We got a supply list together, and then we ask organizations to donate, and we have quite a few organizations that have already agreed to donate, some private individuals, also to supply everything needed. So it will cost Jan absolutely nothing for these home improvements, which I love. That's a great part of it. Yeah. And then the people working send out sponsor letters. It's kind of like a walk-a-thon.
Sure, yeah.
Where if I walk a mile, how much are you going to give? Only this is, I'm helping a widow and an orphan. Will you sponsor me for the day of work?
Gotcha.
And so then that money goes towards the adoption.
Yeah, and if you want to send in money for my bee extermination, it'll go to both hands. So that's great. So when are you hoping to adopt? What's the time? Do you have a time frame at all? Oh, look at the sigh.
I know. It keeps getting pushed off. And right now we are waiting for the U.S. government to approve some forms.
I've heard they're they respond really quickly.
So yeah, we're in a definite praying pattern right now.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm glad that we're praying for that. Looks like it's just a matter of time, though.
Yes.
Okay.
Hopefully within the next couple months.
Well, you've done this 5 times, so how does this rank in terms of on the difficulty rank? Is this the most difficult thing you've ever done, or the sort of in the middle, or how's it?
Well, honestly, it's kind of funny. This one, even though it's been very time-consuming in every way, I really have been at peace with this one the most, because I was so called by God. And even every time I gave him an excuse why I couldn't or wouldn't, he would be like, oh, Nancy, remember, you can't, but I can. And I have just seen miracle after miracle. And so whenever I start to get worried, nervous, scared, I'm like, okay, God, give me just a little something. And he always gives me a lot.
Well, when you were describing earlier about how on a sleepless night you open up Facebook and then whoever you see first, that's the person you prayed for. So you were talking about how God had directed you. Is there some sort of, like, I think a lot of people are like, how does that work? How does that? And so my question really is like, how did that work for you? What was the process like?
For
God speaking to you saying you need to adopt another child.
So this little girl became available, and she's a teenager. There's not a population waiting to adopt teenagers, to be honest. And then with the special needs on top, and they said, we really would like a family who has some experience with this condition. And I'm like, oh, okay, I have experience, but God, I'm really a little too tired. I'm happy I'm done. I have my hands full. And every time I tried to push it to the back of my mind, it came back. And I even reached out to other people I knew saying, hey, you wouldn't want to be another adoptive mom or something like that. And everybody's like, no, but we'll be praying. And it just always came back to me. And so then I started giving God excuses. Okay, God, I'll do it. But my home isn't ready. And every time I ask a construction person to give me an estimate, they give me an estimate, and they're like, but we're 6 months to a year out because of COVID. And I'm like, see, God, my home isn't ready. And lo and behold, we found a construction worker who showed up and gave me an estimate of thousands of dollars less. And I said, okay, yeah, that's good, but when can you start? He's like, how about in 3 days? I'm like, okay, God, you got it. I'll do it.
Yeah. Was this construction work to be able to prepare for another person to come live with you?
Yes.
Which was what? What did you need to have done?
Oh, we had to have our whole basement finished and egress windows put in. It was a huge production.
Yes,
Yes.
I own a home, so just the idea of that is quite large, isn't it? So, yeah. Well, that's amazing the way that God speaks to you. Did God speak the same way to you the other 5 times, or is it always different?
I think it's always different, especially the first time I adopted. It was just really, really crazy because it was like a failed adoption after a failed adoption. I started in Panama, and the attorney took my money and ran. So I was devastated, and I found a little girl. Back then it was legal to post kids online that were up for adoption. And I ended up in Russia that way. And the first time I ever flew on an airplane was from Chicago to Zurich, Switzerland.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I'm not a fan of airplanes. And once I started the process, I was at peace. But before that, I think I wasn't listening to the direction he was pulling me.
Yeah. It feels to me like I'm in the presence of 2 women who are very attuned to God's working in their lives. And so my question for Jan is, just as you've been contacted by Nancy in this process, what have been your thoughts other than, I'm sure that part of your thoughts is like, these are really helpful things in the home, but you're part of a larger process there. So what have you been thinking about of this process?
Well, for some reason, I've had a lot of anxiety because I'm so used to no interruptions in my life, and really not seeing very many people. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but suddenly I'm in contact with people dropping over and having one person already came, and Brad came and painted one of the rooms in my house. Did a wonderful job, by the way.
Yeah.
And so a little of that, but the idea that this was going to enable Nancy to get another child, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I bet it is. It's interesting that the idea of ministry can create anxiety and a feeling of just kind of wondering. How have both of you kind of put that before the Lord, and where are you feeling on your basic anxiety levels right now? We'll start with Jan.
Well, the Lord kind of reminded me when I decided to retire, I did not know how I was going to make it without that little extra income. After my husband died, I worked till I was 82. And the thought of retiring was pretty scary. And one night I was praying and I said, I don't know how I would make it, but I'm willing to try it. And I heard the Lord as clear as a bell that he would provide through the riches of his glory. So I came back to that the other day when I was getting concerned about things, and he just said, I've always taken care of everything. What are you worried about?
That's great. How about you, Nancy?
Well, throughout this process, my anxiety goes clear up, and then I pray. And sometimes it's praying for days straight. And God always talks to me, brings something just to totally relieve any fears that I have. And part of the process for both hands is reaching out to people, asking if they'll be sponsors. And that is so hard for me. I never like asking anybody for anything, especially money. And so there were a few people that I could not talk to. There was just a block. And I'm like, I cannot reach out to these people. And so I prayed for days, okay, God, come on, give me strength. And as soon as I called them, they're like, hey, Nancy, we're so glad you called. We just heard about this project. And I'm like, okay. It's just this anxiety, but God's got this.
Yeah. So are people still allowed to get in on this and help you out? Or
Oh, yeah. We have a sponsorship page.
Yeah.
I think I was going to ask if we can leave one at the table at church or something for people to look at if
absolutely.
they wanted.
Sure. Yep.
But yeah, they can go to the bothhands.org webpage, and it's there too.
Yeah. So as you might have heard, podcast audience, Nancy doesn't like to ask these questions, so I'll ask you to go to, what was it again?
Bothhands.org.
Bothhands.org. And also you could talk with Nancy about this. Any other things that you would like to just add that maybe we haven't mentioned?
Not that I can think of. I'm so excited from, Both Hands has helped in so many ways. There is a side note that hopefully I can get through. So since COVID hit, my mother passed away, and my family has kind of been estranged. And my brother, actually, I reached out to him. He was one of the people I prayed for many days before talking to. I reached out to him about being part of the Both Hands project. And he later called me and said that, yes, him and his son-in-laws, who I have not seen for years, are going to come and be part of the Both Hands project.
Awesome.
And so it is bringing healing in that way, too.
That's great. Well, Nancy and Jan, thanks for coming and sharing with us today. We're just so pleased to hear how this is working out, and we hope to hear in the future how it did work out. So thanks for being with us here today.